We are live, and I just wanted to have a quick reply from the audience. Can you see us? Can you hear us? So please reply so that I can start the series. Can you see? Oh, great, great, great. Thank you, Kanak. Thank you, Srishti. Hi, everyone. I'm Shravani. First of all, thank you so much for taking out time to attend Crypto Innovation webinar series. I warmly welcome all of you. In this series, we discuss innovation in the field of cryptography directly from the innovators. Innovators help us understand the technology and innovation in a better way. Audience queries make this conversation more interesting and informative. Today is part 4, and the topic is self-sovereign identity, SSI. In today's digital world, our identities are scattered everywhere, across every app and service we interact with, either at home or at work. Most of us have lost track of the countless set of registration forms we have filled and provided our personal identity information with the faint assumption that the provider can be trusted and will secure our data. In this chaotic and uncontrolled data growth, the service provider's inability to properly secure critical element of the identity is been proven to be the root cause of frequent identity breaches. Social identity providers such as Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn rush in to address this issue by centralizing the identity and presenting it to the requesting service upon user consent. Some of these centralized identities providers have become regular and easy target for hackers to obtain user information from the source. These breaches not only affected our social, personal, and financial lives, but also led us to slowly accept the alternative reality that privacy is no longer a social norm or a personal choice. Providers also are subject to liable provisions storing users' data across the geographical jurisdiction and are required to comply with various privacy compliance requirements such as HIPAA, GDPR, CCPA, etc. And any breach into their system could result in significant fines and reputation loss. This makes the identity problem a double-edged sword for the user and the provider, and a difficult one to solve. So can we have a solution on it? Can cryptography solve this problem? Let's find out this from our guest today. We have three guests today. Irfan Khan, with more than a decade's experience in working with 30 plus government and telecom regulatory authorities across the globe to build security and data exchange infrastructure. From network security to smart passport, Irfan has been in the semiconductor business for a while. Irfan has previously worked in the security space since 2006 from Gemalto, Cisco, and even Citrix. His last corporate role was regional manager for Middle East, Africa, and Eastern Europe. In 2016, he quit his corporate life to follow his passion. With an educational background in business and chemistry, uh, in the day he is heading Hypermind and part-time electronic musician by night. Welcome, Irfan. Our second guest is Vikram Bhushan, product and engineer. Vikram is a full stack engineer and front end architecture. Having 6+ years of experience in building application, his last role was engineering lead for a small agile team of 6 members. At Hypermind, Vikram helps to roll out full stack POCs lean and quick. He is also involved in finding the right team members to work with. On weekend, you can find him playing drums at any local bar. Vishwas Bhushan, Research and Development, our third guest. Vishwas is developer tune researcher. His research work revolves around blockchain, cryptography, and security. He was the core developer of ZAC protocol, which is permissionless blockchain with the capability to create privacy subchain. He has also worked on project for the Indian government for a retail payments and settlement company. The project was to port an existing banking infrastructure on to a blockchain. Before a co-founding Hypermind, he has industry level experience of Bitcoin Core, Stellar Core, Zcash Core basis. Outside of daily work, he is deeply engaged in learning and development program in some of the engineering college in South India. He holds a degree in engineering and loves to ride bicycle and write poetries in his free time. So I welcome all of you, and thank you so much for coming on our crypto innovation series. And I want Irfan to open up the topic today. So over to you, Irfan.
Thank you, Shravani. That was a very warm welcome. I appreciate it. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I appreciate taking time of your. Can you go back, Vishwas, please? Yeah. I want to thank all of you tuning in, taking time out of your busy day. I want to thank BSCI specifically for getting this together. It's so important for India as a nation to be independent in terms of identity and cryptography, because it is something so fundamental to humanity, and we will see that in a second. As Shravani mentioned, a little bit about myself. Vishwas, please. I have spent the last 10 or 12 years within the identity business. I have basically worked with governments across Europe, Middle East, and Africa to build a national identity system, such as passports, pretty much anything related to identity. And what has fascinated me always about this industry is that to be able to prove who you are to someone else is so functional, is so essential to the growth, and so essential to the community, so essential to us being human beings, that being part of this story was essential for me as a person. Vishwas, can you go to the first slide, please? Thanks. Since the beginning of time, humans as a species have been struggling with this question: who am I? I believe that we have not done really well. We have not done well to answer this question. However, the following question, which comes after this logically, is who are you? I believe we have attained some level of sophistication to be able to answer this question. But I still believe we have a long way to go. When you think about this question, we have spent the last hundreds and thousands of years trying to explain this to somebody else, that who are we and how do we prove who we are? The first signs of identity were actually found from 100,000 years ago, when people used beads and teeth and bones to actually prove to others that they belong to a certain place, or they belong to a certain community, or a certain set of people. Next slide, Vishwas, please. As time evolved, the levels of identity started getting a little bit more sophisticated. Tattoos became the de facto standard for where you came from, which community you belong to, what was your rank in that community. It was only in 209 BC that the first documents actually came out in Rome, and Rome being one of the most powerful nations ever in the history of mankind. King Henry V actually brought out the first passport in 1414. But again, this was not available to everyone. It was only available to the aristocrats and bureaucrats of the time. Robert Peel in the UK, the Prime Minister, introduced the first pin to get organized. But it was not until 1870, which is just 150 years ago, it's not very long ago, that Sir William Herschel actually brought out the fingerprint, which democratized the access of identity and to prove your identity in a certain way. And this is what fascinates me the most. Next slide, please, Vishwas. That identity being a fundamental human right, to be able to prove that you are who you are saying you are, is essential to the functioning of society as we live in today. So we as a team, Hypersign, have dedicated ourselves to building solution that will be secure, simple, accessible, and usable identity system for everyone across the globe. I'm going to hand over to Vishwas now, who has been personally building this solution for the last 2.5 years. And he will talk you through about the kind of problems we've been solving in the last 2 years. Thank you. Take it forward, Vishwas.
Thank you so much, Irfan. I would like to tell my audience that we have these two brothers. Those are expert in blockchain. That's what information I got. So you can just ask any kind of questions to this Vishwas and Vikram, and I am sure that they'll definitely answer all your queries. So before going to the audience question, I would like to start the topic. As Irfan has already talked about identity and some of the history behind it. So Vishwas, I would like to know what are the main problems that we are going to talk today.
So we will start our discussion with password as a problem. Now, when we talk about any problem statement, right, we usually go with we do not declare the problem statement upfront. What we do usually is we go through the flow, like we give the some scenario, like this is how it happens, and then we somehow reach to that problem statement. But I purposefully kind of given the problem statement upfront, and there is a reason behind it. Like this is a high time to talk about the password as a problem, and we are in 2020, and it's been a long time that we have been facing this problem. And there are various flavor of this kind of problem, starting from weak password, default password, password reuse, and some of these problems have actually been solved. It's not like we are not improving, but still we have like more than 80% breaches which involve password. Then why it is happening? Like if you look at this these informations, right, these news are not very old. Even if we have came so far, we are still seeing the problem with the passwords. And mostly when I talk about the password, I feel that there are two realms in which we can talk about the password. One is for enterprise and the users perspective.
So what exactly this? So please continue with the problems in the password that you are trying to tell us. What is this enterprise and end user problems? Can you put more light on that?
Yeah, right. So like I said, right, I mean, again, there are various realms that I can talk about the problem of the password. One day I was trying to visualize, and I could visualize the problem in the real world, digital world, and again in the spiritual world, where you actually ask that question to yourself, who you really are, right? And what is I? So, but then we will not go into that spiritual world, because that's again different, a big realm to talk about, and various people have various uh, kind of perspective on that. But let's just be in the real world, where we see the password problem from the enterprise and from the end user perspective. So talking about the enterprise, right? So if you look at enterprise, we have many different problems evolved. For example, compromised passwords, shared credentials, access privileges, and whatnot. If you look at the data, which was the research which was done by EMA, they said that according to their research, more than 25% of the problem was because of the user compromised user credentials, and more than like 16% was there just because of the shared credentials. More than 12% was there for the shared access or misuse of access privileges, right? And this is not just it. Like if you see, right, it goes on and on. It is not just affecting this, it is actually affecting the overall business for an enterprise. It involves high cost for desk help desk, and then you need to invest your employees to train them so that they can use a password properly. For example, in my previous company, I used to get emails from admins saying that every month or two they will come up with a new type of algorithms or rules for your password to be. So I used to get pissed off with that, and I'm sure a lot of people have faced that problem. Then the third problem which we have in the enterprise is the password reset problem, which looks very small, but when it comes to this one, right, like what kind of cost involved with the password reset? According to some data, they said that for a single reset, it can over cost you more than 50 euros, which means for imagine a small company or a mid-sized company, how much big money it is, isn't it? So we can clearly see that the password is the weakest link for identity management system. Now coming to the end user, right? I remember my father sent me 7th time Facebook request last month, and I asked him why. He said, "Hey, I keep on forgetting the password." And
even I do.
Yeah, we all do. So they see, there are actually two aspects of it. This is how I see. Like with password, you have two aspects. One is security for sure, and other is usability, which is very much important. We sometimes like ignore this second aspect, right? For example, we were having problem with like password reuse and same some password problems. What we did to solve that problem is we came up with a complex rule. Hey, now you have to have 24 digit of password with 10 digits should be character, some alphanumeric and all that, right? Now you have to imagine, like my father, he's a farmer living in Bihar, and imagine for him how much it is difficult for him to remember such kind of password. And as you can see, right, after this all this digitalizations and mobile boom, all of the services are now coming into your mobile app. So are you saying that these mobile app services are not for the people who are living in a rural area? No, right? We cannot say that. They also are the part of the society. And like Irfan said in the beginning itself, it is a fundamental right. So as the number of services grows, the complexity of the managing this password are actually growing. They ask you to frequently change the password for the better security, and even some now they are asking you to have a for security. They are now came up with the concept of multi-factor. Definitely, it is solving some problem, security problem, but you are ignoring completely the other aspect of it, which is a usability. So we need to have that kind of balance between security and what is that, the usability, when it comes to this kind of problem statement. Well, when the apps are growing and then you have to remember a lot of password, that problem is actually been taken care by something called single sign on, where you need to have just one credential. You use the Facebook login to log in into many different websites. But imagine the case when what is that, this your Facebook goes down for some reason, you actually end up losing access to all of the sites, isn't it? So so yeah, so which means, like, my only concern with this is, like, when we talk about the security, are you trying to build an application just for a niche set of people, like so-called educated people who can remember good credentials, or who can understand these kind of security issues? No, right? You want to have a security for everyone. Yeah,
Correct.
So I really,
so you have written your a slide about the multi-factor authentication. So can you tell something about that multi-factor authentication?
Yeah. So I mean, so how it actually came is, like, we were using normal username and password to log in, one layer of security for your system. Now they say that, okay, in order to bring some more security, let's add another layer. For example, after this one layer is not enough. This one layer is part of the security. Apart from that, you also need to have something called OTP or email. You need to like click a link which will be sent by server. So this comes the second layer. Like, after you already provide you the username and password, after that this comes the second layer. And in some applications there is a third layer also. For example, some banking applications, they have these kind of third factor authentication, where you authenticate yourself. You tell to the service provider 3 times your name is Vishwas. I mean, isn't it funny? Like, I have to tell to you 3 times. So for example, if you are going to an airport and you are like, you want to enter, and the security guards ask you, hey, show me your ID card. You shown the Aadhaar card. Hey, this is not enough. Show me your passport also. You've shown the passport. This is not enough. Can you show me your educational certificate? Imagine that kind of scenario.
Yes, it is really tough. Yeah.
I mean, I mean, what I have seen in the password space is, like, we keep on solving one problem and creating another problem. So that kind of the way which we are going. So it's kind of funny.
Correct. So can you tell me, like, how the cryptography will solve this problem? I mean, this is of course the series of crypto innovation. So we would like to know more about cryptographic point of view.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, when you talk about cryptography, I think all of us knows that digital signature is a solution for it. But because the cryptography is in this space for a very long time, like, look at this, right? Like, we started with the RSA 1877. I mean, I'm specifically talking about public key cryptography because that is what I feel that is the solution. And it's not like cryptography is not being used in the case of solving password problem. It is being used. But why not, like, I'm specifically talking about the public key cryptography. You can eliminate the use of username and password. We all know we're using public key cryptography. But the question which I have is, why not has came yet? Like, why not all of the application that we have seen, we have been using, this is 2020, and the technology has been there, the concept has been there for a very long time. So why not are we using it? And the reason which I feel is, again, I will go back to our usability. Like, usability was always a hindrance for cryptography, is what I believe. As in, like, cryptography works on the key pairs, right? The private key and public key, which is very complex and difficult to remember, and also it is difficult to store. It has a special importance. So if you want, like my father, to use cryptography, you need to educate them a new type of UX to use, and because he can't remember things, he can't like he can't even he cannot write it in paper and then use it. It is not that easy for cryptographic keys to use. Whereas in case of username and password, he can at least write somewhere and use it. That's what he must be doing, I believe. So yeah. So but then there are, so this is a negative point. But then there are some good things happening, like digital payment came, right, and where we all are now using mobile phone, and so digital payment actually is kind of, now everybody is using Google Pay to to pay someone, right? So that Google Pay concept is actually brought the the new kind of UX. Like, hey, if you have to pay someone, you just scan a QR code. Nobody knew about scanning the QR code before Google Pay and few other applications. That and now, but then they have got introduced to a new kind of usability, which now they are getting used to it. Of course, now Google Pay has these two things. Like, one, you have to enter the PIN, and then you have to scan the QR code. But I was thinking, like, this usability, the new kind of usability, can it be used somewhere else? So what I'm trying to say is, the new thing is happening, and especially with the blockchain, right, and cryptocurrency wallets. Now people are aware about these cryptographic keys. Again, maybe my father does not know about the cryptocurrency wallet. However, I tried explaining cryptocurrency to my mother, and she was completely understood. She understood that fact. I failed in explaining cryptographic keys to her. but yeah, she understood the concept of cryptocurrency, and I was very happy with that.
Wow,
Anyways,
that's great.
yeah, actually, she only asked me the question, like, why this demonetization thing happened, and I thought that this is a good opportunity to explain her cryptocurrency.
Great.
It was fun. Anyways, so yeah, so these new things are happening. It's not like cryptography, like that space is not evolving. Like, I mean, all I'm trying to say is that there are a lot of research, and now we are talking about the quantum cryptography. A lot of things is happening, but I have just one question, dude. There are people using it in the real world? Like, you cannot just talk about few set of people. These few set of people don't only live in this world. There are people there are a hell lot of people, and they all want the security. So that is just my always this question always comes into my mind whenever I think of any of these things.
So I request audience to please ask the question to the panelists, so that we can have an interactive session. So before we get some questions from the audience, I would like to know, like, how the hypersign is helping to solve this problem.
Yeah, right. So I was talking about that usability thing, right? Like that education. Now people have that education to use a different kind of usability. Like, hey, scan a QR code and do things. So now they are no longer like that knowledge has already been introduced by these big players. What we can do is, we can ride on that knowledge as a small company. Otherwise, we have to educate the new kind of usability, and that was you remember, that was the hindrance. So what hypersign is actually doing is a kind of is an authentication protocol, which passwordless authentication protocol, where user does not need to log in using his username and password. He will just scan a QR code on the website and log in into a website. However, it is more than that, but just to simplify the thing. But what we are gaining over here is, we have to only solve now the security problem. Okay, the usability problem they have already solved. Now everybody in every like village, gaon, across the country, they know this usability. So I don't have to tell them that, hey, you have to learn this new thing. So I don't have to invest in that. So we are kind of using that concept to to use to authenticate people.
So it is the whatever is available, you are building on top of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
can
that
you
is how
explain
we
something?
the way to go ahead.
Can you explain something like blockchain, how it is, involved in entire thing?
Yeah, so uh, that is actually very interesting. Like why, how blockchain can be involved? Well, uh, blockchain, what problem blockchain solves? In order to answer that question, we need to ask this question. And we all know that blockchain solves the trust problem. We And when we talk about the trust, right, we cannot imagine a world with fully trustless. There is no such thing called pure trustless, as per my understanding. You can reduce the trust, but you cannot eliminate the trust. So eliminating trust is not a case, cannot be a case. So the blockchain solves the trust problem. Now I will explain in some like sometimes like what is the trust problem which involves in within the identity. So once when
Okay.
I will explain that, I will take this question as well.
Okay, sure. So can you, how password is connected with the identity? Can you explain this?
Yeah, actually password is a is a bigger a smaller part of bigger problem. uh, uh, okay okay, so it's so interesting. Like if you talk about identity, right, identity actually involved with identity involve a lot of things. There is no one thing with which you can say, think about this, right? My car is parked in a parking lot, and somebody sees my car and he knows me and he knows my car itself become my identity. So basically it's an identity
Ah,
attribute, my
okay.
identity attribute.
Mhm.
These are the small
Mhm.
things. Like looking at my car, he can say that, oh, this car belongs to Vishwas, which means somehow I was identified by my car. Similarly, my caste or my religion or even my country. These all are the small what is that? We call it as an identity attributes, and they all combine together to bring my identity out to the world. So if I have to prove it to you, I have to give some these attributes to you, and based on these attributes you can take decision whether I am Vishwas or not. So similarly password
Right.
is just or email for that matter is just is one of these attribute is what I believe. but uh, uh, but in order to understand in a much better way how these things are all connected, if you look at how identity evolved, right, like
So,
I-
Vishwas,
Mhm.
I'll just would like to pause you for a moment. There is a question by Professor Sure. After signing the QR code, what is the data signed by the private key? The digital signature is on what?
Yeah, so basically what happens in case of hypersign is like whenever a service provider, whenever you go to a website to or and then you click on login button, right, uh, the that server makes a call to the hypersign saying that, hey, can you generate a new challenge for it. So the challenge comes from the hypersign server, and that's what like you cannot see, but if you decode that QR code, you will see that there is a challenge. Now the user will use his mobile phone to sign that challenge, so that, and once the challenge is the digital signature is generated along with the actual message, it goes to the hypersign server to be able to validate.
Okay. Okay. So, go ahead with your how identity evolved. Yeah,
Oh
it's
yeah,
something
yeah.
interesting.
So yeah, sorry. So I mean, even before the silo model, right? If you look at this, right, like the internet came. So uh, remember, I was talking about the physical world and digital world. The digital world is very new, right? The digital world actually exists from the internet. Before internet, there was no such thing called digital world, isn't it? So,
Right.
but then when they introduced the internet, they did not see the requirement of identity at all, because the internet was being used within the some set of people or organization. They know that, okay, who and all is using these services. But as after this world wide web thing got, like now the whole world is knowing about internet and lot of apps are coming. So it was very important for them to have a layer where they can authenticate people that who is accessing what. And similarly, from the end user perspective, whether they are accessing the right application or not. Here I am calling those applications as nothing but a service provider, because they provide service. So so that was the starting of silo model, where a lot of applications were coming, and for a user, if you want to access any of these applications, for each of these applications, you need to have credentials, ID1, ID2, ID3, and you need to remember that. But as you know, that was a problem. You have to manage all of these credentials on your own. So to solve that problem, they came up with the concept of single sign-on, where they brought the concept of identity provider. Now the identity provider, you will just create your account with the identity provider, and that identity, that credential is just one credential. Using that credentials, you will be able to log in into multiple such services, which is within that organization. But as you know that no organization work on its own. Organization always work with different organizations, and sometimes what they need to have is like the employee one of organization one may wants to access some service of organization two. In that case, there was a need of federated single sign-on, where the user will have the identity in his organization, but he still be able to use services from the organization too. You can look at this figure, right, where the user is having on the left and right hand side, the user is having the identity in the
there is some problem with your webcam. Can you check it?
Okay.
It seems fine to me.
Seems fine to me as well.
Okay, you are back. Okay, great. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, yep. So, okay. Oh yeah. So I was talking about the federated, right? While there was a need of federated single sign-on, a federated identity system, and that was the need, right? Because all of these companies do business together, right? So sometimes they want their employee to go to the other organization and work. So for that kind of thing, they brought the concept of federated SSO. But one thing we have to notice over here is like the way it is evolving, it is not eliminating or discarding the previous one. They all are coexisting in our ecosystem. It's not like now SSO is there, so you eradicate the silo model. It is not saying that. They all are existing, and based on the business requirement and based on the scenario, they all exist together.
Okay.
And then came the concept of user-centric identity, which we are seeing in the current world. Like we all know Facebook, right? Where so in all of these, like in rest of these three, what was the thing is like they do not ask users permission to share any information. So what user-centric identity says is like, if you look at Facebook, like when you press the Facebook login with Facebook button, it gives you a pop-up saying that, hey, can you allow your this application wants to use this data? Do you want to allow? So that pop-up itself is like telling user that it's asking the user consent whether user is agreeing on the fact that Facebook should share data or not. So so at least some control or some consent is being taken from the user. So this model, user-centric model, actually understood that user is I mean, I am sharing the user data. I should ask him to share whether I am sharing should share or not. So that's how we evolved. But what is common in all of these three, four identity model is trust and control. So if you look at trust control, right? So look at all of these, like some of these the paper cuttings which I have, like Amazon reset some users' password. We think that we feel that the username and password is in our control, but it is not really the case.
It is not.
Like, now I'm not advocating on the fact that why Amazon reset it. Maybe he's doing for the good reason. But what I am trying to say is like there is a control of that service provider for your identity. He resets you, now he asks you to reset again or something like that. Similarly, Flipboard did the same thing. So these are the examples of the controls that they have. And if they want, they can you might have heard about these things, right? Like what these political parties do is like they will create a lot of fake accounts on the Twitter and Facebook and all that, and these Facebook and Twitter guys, what they do is they delete those accounts whenever they come to know about it.
Okay.
Right? I mean, they do that, right? I'm not saying they are
Right.
doing for the wrong reason, but what I'm trying to say is trying to bring the attention is over the control. Like they have the control of your
Correct.
identity.
They have the control. Right. Correct. So
Yeah. And
so
talking
they
about
can
the
even
trust.
delete our identity, you want to say?
Yeah. So imagine the SSO scenario where you have an account in the Facebook and you have used that SSO to 10 different applications. And for some reason, Facebook decided to delete your account. Now what will happen?
So
You
that
actually
means your digital identity can be completely vanished. You will be nowhere in if they decide, you will be nowhere in the
exactly.
world, digital world.
Yeah.
Right. So
You
it's
don't
really
have access
scary.
to all of yes, it is scary. But
Yeah.
we don't we don't see it as a scary because we do not brainstorm on it. I mean,
Correct.
I was thinking about this one, right? Like, think about this. I will tell you a bigger problem. Like your Aadhaar card, and like when a kid born in India, right? He gets his birth certificate, and slowly when he grows up, he collects all of this credentials. By the way, in terms of self-sovereign identity, all these attributes or the credential is called verifiable credential. So as he grows up, he gets a 10th certificate, 12th certificate, and then Aadhaar card, driving license, and all that, right? He keeps on building all of these credentials. But imagine if a government collapse or government, all those systems get hacked. You won't be even able to say that your name is Vishwas. You won't be even able, you cannot prove that.
Yeah, we cannot prove that. Great.
Yeah,
So it is really scary. So
imagine if that,
sometimes to have this picture is very important. I mean, people they don't understand. I mean, that's what when I was reading about this SSI and I come to know that yes, there is no control actually, and there is some even though there are central bodies with the LinkedIn and the Facebook, but still they have the entire control, and we don't know like if they can remove us from the digital world. So it's really scary. So can we put more focus on SSI? What exactly it will do?
sure. Yeah, sure. So one more thing here to notice is about the trust. So control, I already talked how they are controlling you. The second point is the trust. Like you trusted on Facebook that you thought that, okay, I'm using Facebook for social chatting and all that, but in the behind the scene, Facebook is using your data to sell to some other company. You don't even aware of, you're not even aware of that.
Yeah.
Look at this Snapchat, which is building a facial recognition database for pet. Anyway, he's doing, I'm not advocating that whether they're doing right or wrong. What I'm trying to advocate is that they should at least tell us, okay, they should at least tell us what they are going to do with this data. And I'm not talking
so there is no transparency, you can say.
Yeah, and that's what this GDPR is trying to solve, right? Like it is already there in the European countries that you have to tell, okay, what are you going to do with this data? You cannot. Exactly.
Correct.
So yeah, so we started with this, right? Like our current model of identity is like all of these apps companies controls us, and we are like very small part of their big ecosystem, and we are no one. And but what we ideally want to go towards is something called self-sovereign identity, and which you already asked, like what is self-sovereign identity, right? So yeah,
that's what our topic to solve.
Yeah.
Maybe to solve the problem what we are discussing.
Yeah. So self-sovereign identity talks about giving control of user's identity back to him, where he decides how and where to use his identity. And the glimpse of some part of the self-sovereign identity we saw in the user-centric model also. But then still the control of your identity is all was with the Facebook or those providers, even in the case of user-centric. So self-sovereign identity says that where the control is like it wants to bring back the control of end user to him, and he says that all of these participants are equal, whether be it a user or be it an organization. Imagine if there is no user, what will organization do or service provider do? Like you cannot underestimate him. So that's what self-sovereign identity trying to say, that these are both are the equal entity. So that's what you see in this picture, where you and organization have like I purposefully did this like in the big same circle, Whereas in our previous, all of these identities, user-centric, silo and these user-centric, like IDP is
small.
the and you are the small one. So the end user has no control, whereas this thing SSI wants to give that control back to the user.
Great.
Yeah, but even with that, like many people think that self-sovereign, what these self-sovereign identity people trying to do is something new, but it is not actually new. It is nothing but your impression of your physical identities like Aadhaar card and passport into digital world, but in a right way. So why I said right way is like, it's not like they want to do something very new. What they are trying to do is they're trying to do the same thing, but in a right way. Like how it is like, I was talking about this example, right, where you go to a airport and show your identity card to be able to get into that airport, right? In that scenario, you have actually two things. User is holding his identity. I'm talking about the physical world for now.
Right. Got it.
So where you hold your identity, Aadhaar card and passport in your wallet, and then you show it to the security official, right? But so these are the two scenarios. In the first case, everything is fine. Like it is your identity, it is your credential. You have the paper copy of it, and you hold it in yourself, and you decide where to show. So here, in this case, you are deciding to show it on the airport. This is fine. What is wrong is like when he verifies it. How does he verify? He look at you. He look at the ID card. He does not make. This is completely a manual process. He does not make any call or anywhere to actually validate your data. And I will explain, even if it in some places there is a system implemented, I will explain why that even system is not correct. So in this case, he does not do any kind of check with any system or he just checks you, and he trusts on himself that okay, he is the perfect guy to identify your whether your card is fake or not, and he lets you in. I know very many people who are like not I know, like there are many news where we see that recently there was a news where this Pakistani guy was using an Aadhaar card, right? So they are like things are going wrong now. This is the scenario of the physical world identity, right? But then they when it comes to even a digital world where let's say you want to open a online bank account, and but then you want to do it online. So what this bank guys ask you to do is, hey, scan your credentials or like Aadhaar card and send it to me. Even if you send over an email or some way to them, they at the time of verification, they are still verifying you while looking and doing nothing. Like they are still verifying you in the same way, the way this guy is verifying. And here, in case of this digital scenario, there is one more problem. Now you are using third-party application, Google or Gmail, to share your data. So now you have another threat. So what I'm trying to say overall is, so that was I was saying that SSI trying to do things in the right way, and it is not very new thing. Yeah, it is not very new thing, and people must understand this is like we are not, these guys are not trying to build something new out of nowhere. And like when the blockchain came, right, they were saying that this is a completely new concept and they are trying to do this, that, but it is not. So which is why they have actually if you follow the SSI guidelines, they say that there are a lot of myths about it, as in they're trying to eradicate government, and they're trying to create give all the control to the user, where the user does not even like, so issuer will always be the government, or we still have the same kind of setup where you have government who issues your driving license. All is now what all you are doing is you are storing your digital identity in your wallet, and at the time of verification, the police officer is verifying your credentials with a distributed ledger in the backend. So it is not new thing, and that's what I like said.
So I wanted to know more about like cryptographic point of view. So how the cryptography is involved, and what exactly is the role. So you have already said that there is blockchain is using. So what exactly you wanted to say in terms of cryptography?
Right.
So are we using digital, like as you have said that you are going to use some public key algorithms, right?
Yeah.
So this can be RSA or ECC, anything.
Yeah. So
yeah, please go ahead.
Yes. So I mean, cryptography is always a core technology for all of doing all of this. Because it helps you to reduce the trust. It helps you to secure the environment and everything. So, for example, in this case, right, where this is the driving license example, where now you don't have a physical license. What you do is you make a request, and for so the driving license is, like I said, the attributes are called verifiable credentials in SSI. So you request for a verifiable credentials where government signs, and these all entities have their own private key, public key pair, and government gives you creates a verifiable credentials for you. And when you request, you also give your public key, and government signs that message with, so basically putting a stamp, right? Hey, this is Indian government stamp. So that's what the analogy is. And when the customer tries to sends to the police officer from online or via phone or via scanning QR code or anything, the police official can verify the digital signature because the public key of all of these entities are stored on the blockchain public ledger, where the police knows that, okay, this public key associated with the government, so I can verify the digital signature of government ID card along with the digital signature of the customer. And so digital signature is being used extensively across it. And not just digital signature, when it comes to identity, we also have to talk about privacy. And you can achieve privacy with various different types of algorithms, like starting from encryption, and then there is a zero knowledge proof and whatnot.
So it's a combination of lot of cryptography in it. So
yeah, all of this, like cryptography is a big space realm, right? You can dig deeper, you get lost.
Yeah, correct. I mean, this field is really magical, and thing is that it is really solving lots of problems that digital worlds are facing. And but I would like to know, like, that there are like quantum cryptographic is coming into picture, and the cryptanalysis. So can your model replace with some algorithm which will be compatible with the quantum cryptographic world or quantum cryptography? So, or we have to stick to the conventional or the modern cryptography?
Yeah. So I mean, in HyperSign, what we are trying to do is it's kind of a infrastructure, and all of these components are plug and play. So for now, the HyperSign uses ECDSA, right? And later point of time. So one thing I want to make it clear that we are not a people, or we don't have even expertise for that matter. We don't have expertise to innovate a new cryptographic curve. We are not those kind of people, and we don't have expertise in that. Simply, what we have expertise is we can understand how to make use of the existing better cryptographic keys or the technology to be used. So let's say today we know that, okay, ECDSA is a good enough algorithm to be used for most of this application, and tomorrow this new kind of cryptography came into picture, quantum cryptography. So the infrastructure will still be the same, but that components of verifications and key generation can be replaced with a new kind of cryptography, whatever comes.
Adding on to Vishwas, actually we have a concept, like in our ledger, we have a concept called generalized account, and that helps to replace your current standards or curve to a different standard. So if even like our even business wise, one of our customer wants one curve and the other wants different curve, it is also possible with generalized account. As Vishwas was saying, that it's an infrastructure which has these components attached to it. It's up to the business which curve or what standard they want to use, it will work seamlessly. So this
So it is.
we kept on. So we knew this would be a problem in terms of business and in terms of different countries also. Like India would say, okay, according to our government, we have only this requirement, like only these curves are allowed. But in US or in other countries, the customers would want something else. So keeping this in mind, the generalized account was added. That's I just wanted
Okay,
to
great.
add that.
Great, great. Thank you so much. So it is flexible. It's just an like you can plug into any different algorithm and it can be resistant to the that particular
Yeah.
yeah. So can you throw more about some features of SSI? Or
Yeah. So that is what I have. Like, so SSI works on certain principle. Some of them you might have understood on its own, like existence. So what this
right.
existence is like. Uh, so imagine your username password. You use same username password to log in into 10 applications. Your actually existence is being recorded in all of these places. So you are being tracked. Okay, you have used this application. Vishwas has used username. Vishwas has been used here, 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 here. So they know that. Looking from the top, if you look right, you will know that okay, you are a kind of person who travel a lot, because I have seen your username in Make My Trip, and same at the same time you are a kind of a person uh, who I don't know, you buy some product. So and specific this kind of product. So these all things can be uh, analyzed uh, just by looking at your identity. Nothing else they need. So yeah, so your existence in all of these things is really important. And what SSI says is that you should not be able to track someone's existence. So it should be independent existence. And in the hypersign, if you see as many as application or service provider, whenever you add, for each service provider, the user will have a different set of key pairs. So which is why you won't be able to track a user with his one key or credentials. Similarly, there are a lot of other principles. So basically, there are 10 principles in which control, access, control, for example, user should have the control of his credentials into his account. So for example, if his mobile wallet or something, right, where he can store all of his data safely. And then access. So whenever he's trying to access some data, we have seen that in the user centric, where you should have a consent of the user to take to take permission of the user that where are you sharing the data and not. Similarly, transparency. So transparency is the other part, and I think you asked about the blockchain thing, like where the blockchain comes. So when I was talking about the trust problem, right? So if you have a infrastructure where, let's say, I was talking about the digital signature verification. Now imagine if I put that digital signature verification part into a smart contract, and a smart contract is open and transparent. So you know that what algorithm is being used, you know that for how it is being solved. With cryptography, I'm sure many of you would agree that when you're building a crypto system, you open it, like you tell people that these are the algorithm I'm using. If you're not able to tell, which means that there is some problem that you might face, or you think that you might face. So uh, so imagine that kind of transparency, which is why I feel that blockchain ka jo that philosophy is uh, uh, quite go along with the philosophy of cryptography. So yeah, so that's how it is. And hypersign has, again, I'm not saying hypersign is a SSI product. I won't say that, because but what I see is that even when we were starting building hypersign, we didn't even know about SSI. But when I started reading about SSI, I realized that hey, these are the problems even we are also trying to solve. And some of these 10 principle actually is being solved by hypersign infrastructure.
Okay, great. So there is one more question by Professor Sule is, but if you change the curve, public key will also change and you will need to be certified again.
Yeah, so for that particular application, sir, like the application, I mean, they will decide in the beginning itself, right? Like what curve they want to use. It's not like once the user is on or user is onboarded, they will change the curve. If they do that, then of course that the key pair, a new key pair has to be generated for them.
So
I think
Irfan,
I think from the business side it is a problem, but I am saying that before we onboard an organization, that time is when the curve is decided. Like, what do you want to use exactly? It's not like we are giving them a fixed thing and then you have to use it. So they will mostly take care of that part, like if it is certified or not certified. It's up to the organization who would like to use that, and it will only work for their organization, not other organization who would like to have some different cup or
so it is
a
flexible. We
standard
can say
certified.
Yeah.
Yes.
it is flexible. So any last thoughts on your this complete
I would
product
like
and technology?
I would like to say just one thing. As Vishwas was also saying, I do not want to, at least by next year, I do not want to see the products that we are integrating with. Like my father is saying, okay, I changed my password 7 times. That is one. And the second one is that authentication and good identity or good authentication system is a basic human right. And the companies who are charging a lot of money for this or whatever it is, there is a way to, actually cut it off. Facebook and Google already did it, but now they whatever problems we have with them can be reduced, and now a better system can come out. All we have to do is figure out a way to sell it for free, keep it for free, but still figure out another way to a way to basically make a business out of that. So if that is possible, if that can be done, a lot of new products will come out in the market, and every company, every developer, everybody will have a good strong authentication. It's not just it should be a basic human right. And I think everywhere the problem happens with people, not with the technology. So and the always the people would want to earn more money, and that's where we tend to let go of the security part and go towards earning, I mean getting more money out of that. Like this might would have happened with Facebook or Google, or because they have to sustain their organization. But if there is a model which can help in reducing that cost for the company and also for everybody, that will be what the future would like to see. And then automatically it will become for everyone. No one will be going no one will say that okay, strong authentication, I have to go do this and that. No, not required. And I'm sure technically this is possible. So but I have to see like who, not only us, like we are very small player in that, like we are just starting. But big companies who are into this, what they have to do, what they are going to do this, because everybody have started making noise. Like there are so many startups in this segment from India now coming out. So all the companies who already are into this business have been doing the way they have been, they have to change their model. So I mean, it's just, this is my thought process. I'm not saying this is where everything will go, but this is where we would like to do our product. We would like to sell it for free to everyone, big organization, small organization, but there will be a way that everyone it is basically everyone can run it in very less cost, and they don't feel that having strong authentication requires you too much of power, RAM or processing power or whatnot. So I just wanted to add this in the end. Sorry if it is too much distracted from the topic, but
no, not at all, not at all. I mean, I'm very happy. And there is one request from Dhyan. Hi, would like to connect with the panelist. Kindly advise. So please share, somebody wants to connect with you, how that person can connect with you.
Yeah, sure. They can drop us an email or a phone number. We're available on LinkedIn. We're on, yeah, LinkedIn is good too.
Just check out the
So you are
website,
Hypermind, right?
www.hypermind.in. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So, sir, please, you can join them with on the website Hypermind, or you can contact Vishwas or Irfan or Vikram. So, please do that. And I would like to thank you so much, Irfan, Vishwas, and Vikram, for taking out time and discussing the important concept of SSI. I hope all the attendees are happy with today's discussion. Dear attendees, thank you so much for participation and interaction with the speaker. I'll come up with more such as inspiring innovation in the next episode. So stay tuned. Until next time, stay safe, stay secure. This is Shravani signing off.
Can I add one more point, last point?
Sure, sure.
I'm kind of excited. So we have this DSAI group, right? The WhatsApp group. So there is a guy called Harsh. He told me to read Mandukya Upanishad, and when I read Mandukya Upanishad, I was like, this is what we are trying to do. That kind of expression I came up with, and it is so much, the identity space is so much related spiritually is like, if anybody could go and read Mandukya Upanishad, they can easily relate the space of blockchain and space of identity very easily with our spiritual scriptures that we already have in India for a very, very long time. It is just that we don't read and know. So I would like shout out, I would like to thank Harsh for at least telling me that, okay, this is what you should go and read. So I'm very happy for that.
I'm happy that we are getting question when I'm signing off. So I would like to take this question and then I'll sign off. So this question is from Abhilash. Which blockchain do you support? Are you building your own interface with the blockchain and DID doc? Are you working with any DID?
Yeah, ma'am, I got that question. So right now, since we are supported by 8Entity, so we are using 8Entity blockchain. That is for multiple reasons also, because they already thought about all these problems will come in future when somebody is using for like I was talking about generalized account and stuff, which is very important for our business. So right now we are using 8Entity. The proof of concept and the MVP is going to be on that chain, but in probably by next year we will have a side chain on top of that, which will be only specific to identity. Why? Because we want to reduce the overall consumption of RAM and processing power required to run a node, and it should be something like how a small file or a Java file can run on a system. How much current IDP is using the RAM and power, we also want to bring it down to that. So that's why we are planning to go towards our own network. But right now our MVP is built on top of 8Entity network.
Okay. So great. Abhilash, hope you got the answer. And I think I'm signing off now. Thank you so much, three of you, for joining this crypto innovation series. Bye bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.